Yeah, if you want to hit record, and we'll kind of do our usual thing, kind of go around the room, see what everybody's been up to, and uh, and then I'll just go straight into. I guess I'm the presenter tonight, so I get to just keep the floor. Right?
I will pass because I already had my 2 cents.
Okay, okay then.
Thank you.
Let's see. Thanks. So Dave, are you also Dave is here? Who's offline? Let's see. There is a. Oh, there you are.
Yeah, I'm here. For whatever reason, I can't get any sound out of my iPad, and so I had to log in with my MacBook. So I'm here.
Oh, well, at least you're here, right? So you've
Okay.
been working on anything interesting lately, or?
Uh, I am working on something that popped up yesterday, and I can't figure out what it is. It only
Mhm.
affects my MacBook, but every time I go to initiate a 360 Works scribe script, I get a message that says FileMaker Pro unexpectedly quit, even though it did not quit. And I
Mm.
receive an error message in the my error screen that says Java language runtime exception could not get boot volume name.
Oof.
And
Yeah, that sounds like sounds like something you'll want to check out with 360 Works. Have you tried
I, well,
contacting them? They've
I,
been their support is outstanding in our
yes,
experience.
it
But
is. It is. I don't understand why
mm,
if I have a file locally or up on the server, the same thing happens. I can run it on the Windows side, have no problem whatsoever. So
hmm.
I'm scratching my head on this one.
When you said that uh, it says FileMaker is unexpectedly shut down, and it hasn't, you're saying FileMaker is still open after you've seen that
Oh,
message?
absolutely. It's
Hmm.
still open. It's
Do you have more than one version of FileMaker installed?
yes, I do.
It makes me wonder, because that FileMaker is unexpectedly quit or whatever, is usually issued by FileMaker, and usually only comes up if you're gone,
Right,
um,
exactly.
or it's by the OS actually. But um, I'm wondering if a different version of FileMaker is giving you that message, and that's why the
Yes,
version
it
you're
is.
looking at
Yep,
isn't shutting
absolutely.
down.
Yeah, 14 advanced and 15 advanced is what I have on
Right.
my machine, and
Yeah, you can see
exactly.
I do the same. I got several versions. I got several versions open right now, as a matter of fact, which I love. But
Hey Dave, this is Jason. I have a
yeah,
question for you.
yeah.
Have you changed the name of your hard drive on your
No,
MacBook Pro? No, you're
nothing.
still Macintosh HD. Okay,
Yep.
just a thought. Sometimes that is probably the strangest thing I think the operating system allows people to do. But it comes up in very unexpected ways when it goes wrong. So I thought I'd check.
No, I have not changed the name.
Oh,
Sorry,
interesting
Dave, just to
problem.
jump in here
Yeah.
for a second. I've actually seen exactly the same problem with the container. What was it? The 360 Works container, I think it is.
Oh, really?
Oh, super container. Yeah.
Super container, sorry. And it turned out to be a Java-related issue where I had to call 360 Works, and they basically logged into the client's computer remotely, and there was just some sort of a setting which forced Java to recognize what the boot volume was, and then that fixed the problem.
Okay. Well, I thank you for that. I'll shoot him an email first thing.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Well, tell them we said hi. So we,
Good.
yeah, like I said, they help us out of a lot of jams. They're good folks over there. So Frank, I guess that was you, wasn't it?
Yes,
So
it was.
what are you up to lately?
Just still been working on the same project. That's pretty much it. Nothing too exciting.
I call that work, eat, sleep, repeat, right?
Pretty much.
Yeah. All right, good, good. And let's see, Jeremy, uh, can you can you come on mic and say hi? If not, go ahead and put something in the chat, and I'll leave you alone. But going around putting everybody on the spot, right? So, oh God, he called on me. Karen, I see you unmuted.
Yep. I don't know. My news of the day is I just got my go live date on my new Windows FileMaker 15 server from a client. It looks
Nice.
like I get to land my big weekend right on President's Day, so I get an extra day to work out all my own little issues. So I'm happy about that. And then I
Nice.
laughed because another large client that I haven't heard from in a while, I built something in FileMaker 8, 8.5, and they've decided they're just going to wing it and convert it and test it themselves, and then if they have problems, they'll call me. I said, okay, just don't do it on the Monday you go live and give me an emergency.
Right.
Test thoroughly. So
Yeah.
they're doing it the cheap way, but they are at least assigning their own users the effort of testing. I have they'll be, but it'll be interesting to see what happens. And
Right.
so the other one that I have my go live date, I had the users run through everything, and I have this whole big report on things I'm going to fix once I get the server, my hands on the server. So
Yeah.
that's about
That's
it.
been an ongoing battle for you to get some clients up to the latest version, right? So
Yeah,
sounds
I
like that's
guess
what.
if these are the two big ones that are on 11 still, and for the most part, I think I've got all the tiny ones off. So yeah, I might be able to finally get rid of FileMaker 11 on my computer. That would be good. I could then upgrade them on Yosemite
Right.
still.
Yeah. Well, I still have FileMaker 5.5 installed on mine just in case
Oh,
because
well, what operating system are you on?
Windows 10.
Oh, and it'll
It's
keep it. Well, okay,
it
now that's
still
a whole other
works. It still
discussion.
works.
I'm ready to
Yeah.
start talking about Windows someday from all the rumors I've been hearing.
Oh,
So,
really? Oh.
well, I had one of
Come
the
on over
big
to the
clients.
dark side.
Yeah,
At this point, I should start sounding like Darth Vader, I suppose. But
the big client that is switching, they're huge with FileMaker and Apple, so they get a lot of inside dope. I'm not sure how much this guy's talking out of his hat, but he is ready to move all his graphic design and moving towards Windows now because he's kind of giving up on Mac supporting business clients, or
oh,
Mac
wow.
supporting business clients. So I was like, whoa.
Yeah,
And,
that's startling.
and it's funny because he's saying they're going to keep making the OS more like iOS. And of
Hmm.
course, Windows 8 was Microsoft's attempt to be uh,
Right.
tablet-like, and then they quickly, backstep from that. So maybe in like 3 years, Windows will be more like Mac OS used to be, and then we'll be switching to Windows. I don't know.
Who knows, right? Yeah, I skipped right over Windows 8, so I got lucky.
I had it running for about 5 minutes, and then my one of my interns was like, "Oh, I can get you the beta of this," and he like ripped my poor laptop apart. And then we've rebuilt it twice since, so I think it's on 10. Is there a 10.1? I don't know. I once in a while I use my Windows machine exclusively for opening up a system that a client for Windows uses, and just to see how the fonts look. That's it.
Oh, exactly. Because it's not much that looks different, but you don't want to miss it. That's why we try and make sure at least one of us is on Mac. Right now it's Wayne, although Jason was on Mac and now he's on Windows mostly.
Jason went to the dark side, dude.
What's that now?
Jason went to the
Oh,
dark side, dude.
yeah, yeah. Jason has joined us on the dark side again for a
Yeah,
while.
my 17-inch MacBook Pro kind of finally bit the dust, and well, it's just hard to replace that thing. So right now I'm using one of my kids' laptops because I'm just too impatient to go buy another computer. So
Yeah, well, actually, the Apples they're coming out with new versions of what is it, MacBook Pro?
so I just
So
need $3,000 or $4,000 to go get one of those, and I'll be right as rain again.
well, either that or get the old one because they last for. I mean, the timeline for a Mac lasting is anywhere from 3 to 5 years.
I beg to differ because I can't kill my old laptops. My everything I've bought from Apple going back 15, 20 years won't die. So
Versus a Windows machine. I hear, yeah.
So yeah, I have my
Well,
PowerBook 2400 on up. you never know when you need to like run Photographer or something. I don't know.
Well, as a voice for the dark side, I'll put in my 2 cents for ThinkPads.
Here's a sidebar that I
Yeah, one of my developer friends loves his ThinkPad.
Yeah, it's but my machine's like that. It's just pretty solid as a rock. I had it. Gosh, I can't even remember how long. But
Given any OS as a choice, I will go with the one that gives me a normal desktop. I do not
there
want
you
to feel
go.
like I'm on a friggin' iPad.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Good for what it's good for, but not for everything. Come on. But
Here's an interesting anecdote about ThinkPads versus MacBook Pros here. Recently, Wayne spilled some Capri Sun, right, Wayne, in the keyboard of his MacBook Pro, and
it
had
was
to
thirsty.
had to get that repaired. Meanwhile, discovered the other day while trying to clean the fan on a very old ThinkPad we have around here, we're using as a file server. Taking the case apart, I noticed that on the bottom of it they have these funny little icons near some holes that look like raindrops. And Wayne tells me, "Oh yeah, ThinkPads have plumbing built in, so if you spill stuff in those keyboards, it just runs right out the bottom."
That's drainage. I love it.
Super cool.
It has gutters. So Wayne apparently knew that because MacBook Pros do not have gutters.
No, I keep ruining my computer.
My favorite thing with keyboards and ruining them with stuff, my dad was an electrical engineer, so the first time it happened, he explained that PC boards are actually washed with water during the manufacturing cycle, so don't worry about it. So he had me take it apart, rinse everything, hang it up to dry like laundry, and put it all back together. It worked fine. But the funny thing was I had gotten this from my old programmer friend who did a lot of Mac development. You wouldn't believe the amount of pot seeds I found in that keyboard.
Wow.
He always swore by getting high for programming.
Well, if you watered it more, maybe you would have had something growing out of the keyboard.
Oh, that's true. I never thought save seeds and see what I could grow.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, just pause, pull some stuff out of your keyboard.
Yeah, but I always loved that. That was back in like the 512 SE days. But now I think things are a little more complex. They're hard to take apart. But still, rinse and go. As long as it's not sugar or milk, you're good.
Good. So just a couple left here. We got Tyler and William Porter. Tyler, you want to tell us what you've been up to? Or?
Sure, yeah. So I'm a music school owner and just mainly do in-house dev for our CRM software. And I purchased actually the So Simple calendar after seeing the demo at meeting before last, I think it was.
Awesome.
So that was cool, and I was really excited about that. I think it's going to be a solution we've been looking for a long time. I actually live in Seattle, and I went to the local FileMaker group meeting just a couple of days ago, and John Sindlar from Seed Code is there all the time. He's kind of one of the main members. And I've talked to them about using their schedule, their calendar, because it's just amazing. Obviously they're some of the best in the industry. But the cost of licensing and everything, because we have about 1,600 students and teachers that would need access to the schedules, over a 10-year period was going to be about $47,000. In comparison to the So Simple calendar, it was about $500 to buy it, and it's you can just use the PHP publishing to create calendars for our parents and teachers from that. So yeah, that purchase probably saved me about $46,000 over the next 10 years.
Wow. Great.
So I was pretty excited about that, and so that's my goal for the next month. We've been really busy. January is the busiest month of the year for new students coming in, so I haven't had time to really get on it yet. But that's our goal, is to get our calendaring inside of FileMaker, and that'll be kind of the last piece of the puzzle. Everything else is already in there: accounting, CRM, email, all that stuff. So.
Oh wow, great. So did you get in time for the discount from So Simple?
I did. Yeah.
Oh, great. Good. Glad to hear it.
I fell for it.
Hook, line, and sinker, huh? So,
Sometimes.
Yeah, that was a really impressive presentation. That So Simple is really something else. So I'm glad that worked out.
Is anybody here today using So Simple calendar?
We're not yet. Anybody else? No takers.
All right. Thanks
So-
for letting me lurk. I'm going to turn off my mic and wait
So
for...
that puts you in charge of telling us about your experience when we go around next month.
Okay,
So
fair enough.
you can let us know how it's working in the real world. So
Appreciate it.
It sure worked. It sure worked fine in the demo, but
Yeah.
that is right.
Absolutely.
So, be good
Well,
to
it
hear some
does,
real world
and just to
experience.
clarify, it lets you bypass the whole, you don't need the WebDirect stuff or any WebDirect licenses. So we're going to be able to publish, custom mobile-friendly JavaScript calendars essentially for, for 1,600 people, and to try and license that on WebDirect would make it just impossible financially.
Yeah, yeah. I think WebDirect really makes sense for cases where it's a lot of internal users, but
Right.
publishing out to the wide world or to that many people, yeah, the licensing gets pretty ugly pretty fast. So.
Yep. Well, thank you.
All right. Well, yeah, thanks for joining us. All right. Well, I think William told us back channel here that he's got a bit of a head cold, so everybody say get well, and we'll go ahead and get started on the presentation. I do have quite a lot of slides here, but a lot of them just say discuss, because we're going to be talking about naming conventions today, and seems like everyone has one. So I'm really hoping to hear from other people, their opinions, what kind of conventions they use. We can compare and contrast, and I'll be pretty astonished and a little disappointed if I don't walk away with some new ideas for our own naming conventions. What I really want to focus on is more the kind of the strategies, what we're trying to accomplish with a naming convention. And, there's many ways to accomplish those objectives. So don't feel like, if you don't use our naming convention, you're wrong. That's certainly not true. But, I'll trot ours out where applicable and just kind of look for feedback. So everybody be ready to jump in and turn your mic on if you want to join in. Think of it more of a workshop. So. All right, let's see if I can start this blasted thing here. All right, and get my console out of the way. So like I said, I do have a lot of slides. Most of them are pretty short, but a lot of them are about generating discussions. So if we don't even make it through the prezo, I'm sure we can still have a great discussion, but this gives us a nice framework for it. So let's see. I have to remember how to use this. There we go. So first and foremost, just kind of really high level is what are the benefits of a good naming convention? FileMaker lets you name things pretty much whatever you want. It's pretty relaxed as development environments go. And I think as new users, or particularly if you started off just with FileMaker on your desktop, just kind of kicking around, well, like I did, and then it suddenly ballooned into a huge project. You kind of sit down and just start naming stuff whatever. And if you're just working on a smaller solution, or even if you're working on a relatively large solution but only on your own, it's tempting to go, why am I worried about this? So some things that a naming convention can do for you is make some commonly used items easy to find and work with, so that they don't get buried in a big long list. Using name spacing, and I'm trotting out that word as if everybody knows what it means. They might, but name spacing is the practice of putting the most general thing first so that like items group together in an alphabetical list. For instance, if you're looking at a table of people, actually I have some in an older solution up on the screen here. Like here's people. If I were to name this, first name, last name, middle name, prefix, then all the parts of the name would end up just scattered all over an alphabetical list. But because I put the most general thing first, this is name first, name last, name middle, all my name stuff ends up together. So that's, generally speaking, the practice of name spacing. Okay?
I do if I didn't know the name.
Right. For the longest time, I didn't either. I picked that up at DevCon. So I think it was during one of Todd Geist's prezos. He said that enough times that I went, okay, what does he mean? And then realized it was something I did already, but it's nice to have a name. Yeah. Right, right. It's nice to have a name so we don't have to say, you know, that thing, right? So, uh, another thing you can do is you can reduce errors by making some facts about your items readily apparent. So, for instance, being able to look at a field name and know that it's a calculation, or know that it's global, or know that it's unstored. If you can identify that just by looking at it, it saves you from doing silly things like, you know, trying to set field into a calculated field, or putting something in a global and not realizing it, and all of a sudden it's the same value across the whole system. Um, just being able to look at a name and get some more information so you can work more quickly and more accurately. Something that's near and dear to my heart is adding some meaning to the names so that they can actually be parsed and read. Um, Naming things consistently enough that you can use the design functions like object names and so forth, for instance, using get active object name or getting active layout object name or get layout object attribute, and your scripts can actually find out something about the object just from the name. So it kind of gives you that leg up when you're trying to get your scripts and your functions to be a little more abstract. You'll see examples of this as we go forward, but streamlining communication with other developers is a big one. As I said, if you're working alone, you might not. I know before I brought on Jason years and years ago, when I was working alone, I didn't realize just how much stuff I was keeping in my head until I tried to put it in somebody else's. So having consistency in the naming so that if Jason names a field, I can probably figure out what he named it. And if I name a field, he can probably figure out what I named it. Just makes it so much quicker to communicate and work on each other's code. And finally, streamline communication with yourself, your future you, because I know particularly if I'm working on something pretty complex, sometimes it's only a month or two later I'll go back to it, and it's almost as if another developer wrote it, because I don't remember all the nitty-gritty details of what I put in there. So having that consistency, not just within a solution, but across solutions, helps me get my feet back into a project a lot quicker. So I'm not trying to figure out what would I have called that, or you know, where would I have put that, or that sort of thing.
All right, Chris, if I can just jump in here for a second.
Please do, please do.
Were you intending to go through these items after to show kind of what your, for example, I'm looking at like putting an underscore C or an underscore G or something like that to identify a calc or a global.
Yep. So, yeah, we're going to go through each thing you can name, kind of one at a time, and some of them will be pretty quick, but some of them, of course, we'll get into much more depth. But yeah, definitely going to be talking very specific. So this is just kind of my high-level first slide. Just a couple of things I want to get out of the way. So first of all, just why do we have a naming convention? And then also I wanted to talk briefly, because it's likely to come up anyway, just your basic how to write, things like camel case versus snake case. Lift case you can't really effectively use in FileMaker because it has a minus sign in it, or a dash that gets interpreted as a minus sign. But there are many ways to string together words. I can't do show of hands here, but I wonder how many people in the group are using camel case and how many are using something more like snake case. Maybe we could throw in the chat kind of a quick voting. So we got an upper camel case, and both. All right, camel case. I have to confess to using both sometimes accidentally. I'll forget.
You know what the worst part is if you pick up what somebody else has done, like a guy who's not worked with FileMaker, and you know how FileMaker can make the title on your screen look good? They'll use that, and that's a royal pain in the butt.
One of the things I like about the snake case is when you use those for field names, nice simple ones, but it's always a space, Later, when you do your layout, you can do a search and replace for underscore and replace it with a space, and everything looks pretty.
Yeah, that ties into why we use Snakecase as well, because it's much more, it's easier to parse, and I'm certain that I could write. In fact, I think I have as an exercise once. You can write a custom function that'll recurse through CamelCase and figure out where to put spaces. But my argument against that is if you have CamelCase, you can't have any underscore, lowercase words. So, for instance, if you had something that was name of product, in CamelCase you have to capitalize of, or you don't know where the word starts. In Snakecase, you don't. So we've gone back and forth about this internally and settled on Snakecase, and I think that was the final straw for us, where we said, okay, we're just going to stick with Snakecase. Did that make sense to you, or? Oh,
In my custom function names, I use CamelCase.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah, we've tried to standardize on the Snakecase throughout, but like I said, we still have some relics floating around of some CamelCase, and it's not terrible, but like I said, you can just parse stuff out a little easier with Snakecase. My one issue that I have with later versions of FileMaker, though, is that it used to be if you double-clicked on something that it was in Snakecase, it would highlight the whole thing. And starting with version 14, it doesn't. Well, version 14, for some reason, sees an underscore as a word break, which seems, well, bad, right? If I could demo that,
That's highly disappointing for my old solutions.
yeah, because I mean here this was great. I could just double click, I get the whole thing, right?
Yep,
So I could pick out a field from a very long function, but starting with version 14.
Who do you think makes these decisions?
I don't know. I'm trying to find him so I can him or her so I can influence them as much as possible. Because
I did that once at a DevCon. I was the guy who worked a lot with container fields at FileMaker. I was drinking him under the table and arguing with him. But I tend to feel that there's too many millennials doing programming, and they don't know what we all do for the last 10 or 15 years. So yeah.
Yeah, I have kind of wondered sometimes if they have enough Windows people in the room too. So because there's some Windows conventions in the later versions that got missed. But yeah, this is an example. Starting with 14, when you try to double click, you only get the word. It sees colons as breaks now, and underscores, which are precisely to avoid a word break, are seen as a word break. So
I was going to point out, Chris, there that even back in the days when that worked as you liked it,
right.
Prior to 14, it never quite worked like that on Mac. Mac always found that the colon would break up your selection, so you could never get the table name and the field name all in one go. There, you had to do a swipe at it or something to get the whole selection. But yeah, I was sad to see that go on Windows when it did.
Yeah.
Incidentally, it still works the same way on Mac, by the way. You can still get a whole field name or a whole table name, but not both. So that didn't change the behavior on Mac, only Windows.
I know they're just trying to get me to switch to Mac, but it's not going to work. I'm not going. Anyway. Okay, so past all that, I kind of put that slide up there because I thought we might get bogged down in it later. Because some people are very passionate about either using CamelCase or using Snakecase. And it sounds like we've used, among us, we've used both, but we're not too dedicated to one or the other. I did have something on the previous slide that I can't now get to. Oh, come on. Well, I'll just tell you what it was. That they have done studies to see which one's more readable, because a lot of times somebody will argue that the underscores are more readable or the CamelCase is more readable. And the studies determined that you can work faster with the one you're used to, but that's about the only difference. So. All right, so getting into the meat of it, just a list here of the elements to be named. I bet we'll realize that I've forgotten some, but even just off the top of my head, you can see there's a lot of things that we have to name in FileMaker. And I was going to kind of walk through each one, talk about some of the goals that we've considered and some goals that you might consider, and how we've addressed those goals, and then kind of for each section just kind of do a little bit of a discussion about what do you do that's different, or do you think might be beneficial as an idea. I will say that due to our development style, which is a little bit unusual, we spend a lot of time at the top of this list with tables, table occurrences, fields. We don't tend to have a huge amount of layouts. We don't tend to have a huge amount of scripts, for instance. So there's some areas where, frankly, our own naming convention is not really thorough. And I'm interested in finding out from some people who maybe do have a lot of layouts, a lot of scripts, a lot of one of these items, how you manage it when those lists start to grow. Okay, so be prepared to chime in. Again, this isn't just all about our naming convention. It's about naming conventions in general. So
here's something. Does anybody remember using the thing Panorama, the old database? I did that in the 90s, and it had reserved words, and that's one thing nice FileMaker doesn't do.
That's true.
Because it had count, and so I'm forever putting, when I do count, because I had to do it in Panorama, putting a K for count instead of a C.
Oh,
and
wow.
It's like the holdovers.
Yeah.
That's one of my holdovers. When I put count in, I say count of KOU. Because it was a reserved word, and that's one thing nice about FileMaker.
Right, and that's something that we end up considering when we're looking at databases that we're going to be integrating with things like SQL and so forth. SQL, of course, has a lot of reserved words as well. Over the years, I've obsessed about that at one time or another, and I keep coming down to there's just so many reserved words in so many languages that we're going to end up having to, quote things out or comment, not comment, but escape. That's the word I'm looking for. We're going to end up having to escape out some field names and anyway. So we just make it a practice to escape out any characters, regardless. Like in SQL, you can pass your field names and table names and so forth in either ticks or quotes. I can never get that right without practicing. So, like for instance, we don't worry about putting an underscore at the beginning of a field name, even though that's meaningful in SQL, because we're going to end up quoting it out anyway. So.
I just want to jump in here for a second. A while back, when I was working for another company, we thought it was useful to use reserved words, but use them in a different language. But even that came back to bite us because we had to transport the database to another country, and that's the language that we were using, so we couldn't edit certain fields there without renaming them.
Oh no! So you thought you had it covered, but yeah. So I guess that's the lesson there. Is that it's kind of a fool's game to try and think of everything that might be reserved in some other language that you may want to interact with. It's just kind of settling on, this is something we'll have to deal with regardless, because we can't predict every reserved word or reserved character. So, all right, so we're going to jump right in here. Tables. So what kind of goals, what can we accomplish with a consistent naming of tables? So first off, clear names that won't mislead us as to what constitutes a record. Sometimes I think that's probably the most important question you should ask yourself when you're creating a table is what constitutes one record in this table? Because sometimes you'll see you go back to somebody else's development or perhaps your own old. I know some of my old development I have this problem. Where you look at a table name and go, I'm not quite sure what one record is from the name. So keeping things as simple as possible, but no simpler, to paraphrase Einstein. Try not to name something obscure or, go into a new table not being sure right away, because by the time you figure out what it is, you'll figure out you named it wrong. So, name spacing, which we've talked about already, getting like items to end up together alphabetically is nice. Predictability, again, from developer to developer. Sometimes you see things that are unnecessarily obscure. Like, for instance, I've often seen a table that's clearly companies but called accounts. Trying to use the most common words so that people aren't fishing around trying to figure out what you meant by that. And also, and this goes back to the parsability, being able to have your system read things. Can we build other meaning into our table names so that by looking at a table name, we can tell, for instance, is this a join? It might be something we want to accomplish. Or can we put in something that the computer can parse, that FileMaker can parse and figure out for us? So our convention, we assign a TLA, or three-letter abbreviation, to every one of our tables. And we name our table whatever the TLA is, underscore, underscore, and then the plural name of the records. So note the double underscore. That helps with name spacing when you're looking at a table in the context of other table occurrences. The main one will come up first. So that's what the double underscore is for. We always use plural names. I'm not saying that's necessary, but I would advise either pick plural or pick singular. Don't mix them. It just makes it hard to remember what you name things. Like, if you're going to don't go with company and person, right? It's either companies and people or company and person, but be consistent. Regarding the hooks, our TLA, or three-letter abbreviation, acts as an unchanging key for that table in the system. So we might change the full name of a table, but we'll always leave that TLA the same, so that a lot of our scripting and functions and so forth will actually read the TLA instead of the full table name or the full layout name. And that way, like I said, the TLA acts as kind of a key that changing the rest of the name of the table is not going to break anything in the system. Makes it a little bit less brittle. And then the table list ends up acting as a cheat sheet. Okay, so let me show you what that looks like in a real solution. This is our internal solution here. And here's the tables in this solution. So you see there's TLA, underscore, underscore. So ACC is the TLA there, and then underscore, underscore, and then user accounts. So if we had a customer or some other reason we decided to change this to logins, we would change this part, but we would never change this part, because we've got functions and scripts and so forth that are looking for the ACK table. And we're able to change this part of the name without worrying about breaking any existing coding. Does that make sense to everybody? Any questions about that? Okay, I will take that as no questions.
I think once you get used to the prefix,
Right, and that was another deciding factor too. Is like I said, it acts as a cheat sheet. If you ever have a TLA that you don't remember what it is, well, right here is your cheat sheet, and it's in alphabetical order. So I go, what is LGN? Oh, look, it's oddly enough logins. But you can find a TLA and find what it is. So, okay. And then for table occurrences, I think we've discussed that pretty much all of us use anchor buoy, so I don't think this will be too controversial. The goals with the table occurrence still the name spacing. You want to have clear context. You want to be able to tell, where does this table occurrence appear on the relationship graph. Brevity is important. I've seen some god-awful long table occurrence names where by the time you find the darn thing on the relationship graph, you've forgotten what the name is. So trying to take those things that are 3, 4, 5 hops away, but not have the name balloon into something that's characters is a challenge sometimes. And then modifiers for unusual relationships, because you could have more than one relationship between table A and table B, and there's usually the obvious primary key foreign key relationship, but you need a way to indicate this is not the normal relationship. This is by date. This is by time, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So for our table occurrences, we leverage this TLAs again. So we end up with TLA underscore, and you see we're able to put in a modifier. And this is new. We started adding double underscores around the modifiers just for parsing, so that when you're parsing a table occurrence name, you can tell which part's a modifier and which part is a table TLA. The TLAs accomplish the brevity goal, and then the context is provided by anchor buoy. So let me show you again, getting in here.
Why did you end in TLA, or was that just an example?
Oh, that would be if there was a TLA beyond the modifier. Does that make sense?
Same table beyond the modifier.
Oh, it could be a different table. I'm saying.
That's what I meant by sample. Okay.
Yeah, so for instance, I can tell this is from the projects tog. I go through clients to licenses to vendor license contracts. I know what the TLAs are. But again, if I didn't, I could look over here. So you can get the context, and again, still keeps it brief. We had not implemented the double underscore here yet, but let me see if I can find one. See, like this one here, if we were to put in our newer decision about that, we'd put double underscores around it, so that if we're parsing this, I can tell that this is a table, this is a table, this is a modifier, and this is a table.
I notice you don't color the table occurrences. Does anybody else do that? I usually will color every like login table will be a specific color, so I can easily see them on the graph.
That's an excellent question. I can talk about what we color, but I'd like to hear if anyone else
You don't
does
seem to
that.
color anything, so I was curious.
It may seem that way, but we do. We use very limited color, but I'd like to hear if Dave color codes. All right. So you assign a color to every table, huh?
Every table, I give it its own color. I use gradating colors in terms of like relationship. Like in other words, invoices might be green, therefore invoice line items are light green. Stuff like that going on.
Oh, this thing.
Does it ever get hard to manage the colors? Do you ever like put a table occurrence out there and forget what color it's supposed to be?
No, it's obvious because as with anchor buoy, the primary color for every table is there on your left. And then if you need to quickly see them without having to double click and say Command U and find them all, you can just look around and say, oh, there's another occurrence of that.
It actually doesn't sound so bad.
Then again,
it sounds like it does take some
my
work.
background's graphic design, and I used to do like tickets for large trade shows and stuff, so I'm really used to picking color.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Like a designer.
You ever go into a trade show and they like look at the color of your badge to decide where you're allowed to go?
Yeah, more or less.
Yeah, the New York Boat Show, I had to do like 42 different color badges. That was fun.
Yeah, that actually sounds pretty cool. You'll have to show me what your RG looks like sometime.
I actually gave Chris an example web page. Chris, did you get that, or was that to Wayne? We had this discussion a couple years ago in New York, so I made a web page of my examples and then just left them up there.
Huh. Yeah, I missed
okay.
that somehow. I don't know. Not sure who that went to.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So I'm getting some comments from the group. One from Jeremy. He says he color codes the delete relationships, and we do too. Actually, we do.
Oh, yeah.
So here, anything that's red is a delete relationship. So that's one you definitely want to stand out, of course. One thing we're looking at doing the separation model in our next base, and with the separation model, we could color the deletion relationships in the data file where they should exist, and color the creation relationships in the interface file. Because creation is another one that's nice to know just at a glance. So do you do anything about coloring those, being able to identify your deletion relationships, or?
I was doing that more with text. Like I see you have an X at the end, that kind of thing.
Oh, okay, okay, that works.
Well, what does the X mean? It's now that we're looking at the X.
That X is for a very specific thing that we do. It has to do with our selector connector, not selector connector, our X-Link, where we do selections. Jason actually gave a talk on that recently about.
You just made me crack up because I'm thinking of XML. I use X in front of a field name when I'm decommissioning it, like it's coming out of the system. You could repurpose or whatever, but it gets an X in front of it. Then I hired an assistant who's into XML, and he started putting an X in front of everything that's parsing to XML, and I was like, ah!
Oh no! Yeah, we got to get together on this, right?
I was like, no, you're messing with my system.
Right. You'll see as we go through, we use X's at the beginning of things like custom functions. So all our custom functions start with X, just so that we can group them in the big long list of functions. Probably picked up the X because of Expense Attack, but this one is actually, yeah.
What I just wanted to say about Monkey Bread, I was shocked because he's designed it so that there's no list of custom functions at all, and you just simply call a function from the reference sheet, so there's no clutter in the function list.
Interesting.
Yeah, I hadn't realized it.
So you have like one custom function that calls the rest of them or something?
Yeah, it's like, Monkey Bread, parens, whatever. But it was funny,
okay.
when he first tried to sell me on it when I met him years ago, I'm like, I couldn't even imagine that nightmare list of custom functions showing up on that thing. And then now that I bought it, I realized, oh, you just call what you want. You do need a reference sheet, obviously.
Right. But yeah, there's so many functions in Monkey Bread, I can imagine.
It cracks me up. For what it can do, I was like, all right, I have to own it, at least for my own desktop. It's great.
Right. So yeah, so we've got the coloring for purpose or coloring by table. So two perfectly valid ways to do it, and in order to get that meaning as far as whether it's a delete relationship, Karen's using extra letters in the name. That's also seems just fine. What did I just see?
Sorry, Chris, can I just throw something in here for a second?
Frank says that he uses spiderweb. So
yeah, well, I think that's just a preference. But what I'm curious about is you've got your table occurrences, not the primary one, but the related ones all closed. And I used to do that, and I've switched to actually having it open so it just shows the field that I'm linking to.
So at this level, right?
Yeah, I guess, well, it looks, yeah. But then I have
there's
to,
a lot of stuff related here.
Yeah. Do you see a benefit or what's the reason that you guys went with having it closed? Is it because there's too many relationships?
Yeah, just that there's quite a lot. So here, let me back this out to where you can see them all.
Yeah.
There's just quite a lot, and if you had them all open, just takes up more space. I mean, that's just a preference thing. I mean, that's not really part of our convention, just kind of a habit we've fallen into.
Okay, and you don't find you have to go in to look at it? like sometimes you're looking for a specific relationship, and then you're having to go in and look at it to figure out which one it was?
Well, that's generally what the naming is doing for us. So I can look at this and know that, yeah, I don't generally need to see the fields to know the relationship.
So if
I
you
mean, for
have,
some of the more complicated, I mean, I'm not telling you that I remember, for instance, oh, this only has 2 parameters, of course. Um, you know, I'm not saying necessarily that I remember all the parameters of a complex relationship, but I can look at the relationship name and determine whether it's the one I'm looking for.
okay, because I find sometimes I even have a couple of different relationships, you know, between two items. Like one of them to delete records, one of them to allow creation, one of them just to view, one of them to sort in a very specific way. So there's 4 relationships right there, and I'll try to name them accordingly, but every once in a while I still have
Well,
to look to see.
that's where the modifier comes in, and I think also the TLAs help with that. So by getting that brevity, you know, a lot of times the reason you may be reticent to put a modifier is already the table occurrence name is getting long, right? Um,
Yeah.
we have pretty short ones. So adding, you know, sorted, or even, you know, sorted by such and such a field, or, you know, create or add or, you know, delete. It's not so bad to add a word on the end, and then I can tell just looking at the name.
Is
So
the last
I know
acronym?
the order of the tables. I know the order of the tables, and if it's not a normal, you know, foreign primary key, then I have something to indicate what that relationship is about.
In
Say
what
again?
we're looking at, can I ask, is the last acronym that's capitalized the actual table occurrence?
All the capitalized things are table occurrences.
No, I know that. I meant one of them is going to be the actual table it's based
Oh,
on.
yes, yes. So this is based on addresses. I can tell without getting
Right.
into
So
it.
the
If
very
we
last
double,
cap is
yeah,
the. Okay, gotcha.
right.
Chris, I was going to suggest that we have a couple of strategies that we use to kind of help with having to with avoiding having to open up, well, not avoiding having to open up the relationship, but when we need to get to that relationship info, a couple quick keystrokes that make that an easier prospect, especially when you got like a load of these relationships that are really stacked up close, and it's hard to click the line or click the equal sign or whatever. You can arrow left and right to get to the relationship info, and then you can Control O or hit the pencil, or Command O works on Mac, and you're in without having to stop and mouse, very finely to get to that. So that's a big one. And then when you're outside the database definition, you don't forget about the relation info function. You can actually call that up in a data viewer and see all the relationship info, at least the predicates you can see from that function. So without even having to go into manage database, you can find out what the relationship is between 2 table occurrences.
Yeah, has everybody seen that, the relation info? That's a good point. When you are trying to figure out the parameters of a relationship, just you can bring it back like that. Has everybody seen that before?
I don't think I have.
Yeah, it's dead useful. I actually brought up the RG of one of our more complicated solutions. This is actually one of 2 files in this solution. This solution is really large, and sometimes just displaying the RG takes a while. So being able to just pull up the relation info right in the data viewer is really helpful. And by the way, Jason, you said it only shows the predicates. It does show options, but it shows options on the far side of the relationship, if that makes sense. So you can see create, delete, and sort would show in here, but it only shows one side. If that makes sense to you.
Is that the right side by definition?
You would think, wouldn't you? It's showing.
I'm never sure.
Right. It's let's see. If I go Con-add is one, for instance. If I look up, this is the contacts addresses, it doesn't show any options. But if I look at the table occurrence contacts, and con-add is just one of many. By the way, it'll bring back anything related to that TO, right? So from contacts, here are all the TOs hanging off contacts. And see, for this one, it's telling me from this table, what can I do in the other table? So I don't know if left and right really describes it well. That probably sounded like I meant exactly the opposite of what I said. Or, wow, I did it again. But it'll tell you from this table, what can you do, what are you doing to the other table?
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
Lovely. I love it.
Yeah, I actually, in one of our Skunkworks projects that I don't have this rolled out in production yet, but I actually have a function that will parse this.
How long has that been around?
I think it's been around since pre-7, I think.
Wow.
Yeah, it's underused. You know, the design functions are pretty awesome.
Well,
But
obviously the guys who build things like Inspector, etc., are making good use of
yeah,
those.
they're reading them. Yeah, so this says originated FileMaker Pro 6 or earlier. So it's been in there.
How did I not see that one go by? And the everything. Does everybody have a copy of everything reference? It's getting long in the tooth because they haven't reissued it.
I used to have one.
Yeah. Let's see. I guess they stopped doing it in version 10. But I laughed because when they first did it, they came out with a two-sided poster.
Wow,
So basically, you had to have both 2 copies of the poster and then cut it up and make it into a booklet.
that's just a sales technique. He got you to buy 2 of them.
But yeah, I kind of wish they had done it again because I like their explanations in their booklet better than what FileMaker puts in their help menu.
Yeah, although, you know, I often have good things to say about FileMaker Help. As help goes, it's pretty darn good. But if you haven't before explored this, you know, to tie it back into the presentation here, check out the design functions because you really can read a lot of the metadata. You really can read a lot of field names, table names, layout objects, that sort of thing. And if you can read them, you can operate on them. You know, you can have your scripts branches according to, you know, what type of field is this, or even where is this field on the layout. I started to say I wrote a custom function that would actually parse the relation info and then using a script, create a find request in the other table so that rather than using go to related, I could perform a find in the other table to get to those related records. I suspect that my reasons for doing that are terribly obscure at the moment, but it can be done. So, like, just the takeaway there is you can get to the metadata, and you can do a lot of
Yeah,
things
hey,
with it.
Jeremy, just, I'm chatting him back on that one. Jeremy posted that he did something very cool in a similar thread, a similar vein with the function. He's doing a dynamic sort.
Portal sort. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That's something. I'd like to see that, Jeremy. That's I'm going to get distracted and I'll never get through these slides, but that sounds really awesome. We need to take a note and hopefully get back to that today, or maybe take a look at that in a future PUG. That sounds really cool. Yeah, maybe we can team up and show all the cool things you can do with design functions. But all right, getting back here. So, hey, look, discussion. That's exactly what we were supposed to be doing. So that works great. Any last minute things about tables and tables occurrences? And did I miss anything? I got a lot of comments floating around there. I'm not sure I tied up all the loose ends.
I've got one quick one for you. When you have a join table, I guess you guys just assign it a 3-letter acronym, but let's say it's, I don't know, contact to event. do you put contact first? Do you put event first? Or like, do you have a way of picking that?
Generally speaking, the way we develop just about any table can end up as a join table. So, generally we try and give it a name in its own right. So, for instance, a join between contacts and events might be, event roles, right? That's their role, a contact's role in a particular event. So,
Yeah.
we'd probably just assign it its own TLA. We
So
are.
I guess what I'm trying to get at is, would you call it event roles, or do you call it contact role, meaning like contact in the event kind of role? Like that's where I tend to flip back and forth, and I can't figure out which one I want to put first, or if there's a reason for putting one first versus the other.
Yeah, I can't think of a reason to put one first instead of the other, but like I said, generally we end up giving the table a name in its own right, not just the name of the two tables it's joining. But we are moving away, we're trudging away from multi-line keys that we've used a lot in the past and using more and more join tables. So we have discussed, instead of having like a 6-letter abbreviation, for instance, to make it really clear that that's a join table for things that are just joins. But very often we end up having a single join table that we reuse. I mean, if something is a join table just to link two foreign keys, you really don't need a new table for every join, in my opinion. So just having a table called, we have a table called roles, for instance, that is pretty much anything's role in another thing,
Yeah.
All right. Well, moving on then. Let's see. Fields. I'm gonna try and go through this fairly quickly, but this is where my passion is, so I might have to gloss over a few things to get through this in a reasonable amount of time. So fields, of course, consistency, of course, clarity for developers, readability for users, because turns out users really do see field names when they have to do sorting. If they're doing their own sorts, exports, etc. Avoiding characters that are hard to type. Personal peeve. I've seen bullets in field names. That's real easy to type on a Mac, but not so much on a PC. So be kind to others. You don't want things that are going to be confusing, and of course you have to avoid mathematical symbols because FileMaker wants to interpret them as mathematical symbols, so you can't use dashes, pluses, things like that. Namespacing, of course. For myself, we generally use the pipe as a separator within text, like within variables and things, when we have to throw up like a virtual table or something. So we avoid it in the naming of other things, but other than that, if you've got another separator, I see nothing wrong with the pipe. It's easy to type. It's not mathematical.
I use it in my
satisfying.
table.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, it's not my personal preference, but that sounds fine.
But it's not
Just like
hard
I
to
said,
type on Windows? I hadn't thought
Oh
about it.
no, absolutely not. It's shift
There's no
backslash. There's a pipe.
No option key characters, I would imagine, from the Mac.
Yeah, yeah. I was actually working on one database years ago where the full access password, which I wasn't allowed to change, had a bullet in it. I'm like, I actually had to copy paste it onto like a text editor so I could copy it and paste it when the password dialog came up, because it's just, you need about 18 fingers to type that thing on a Windows machine.
Yeah. I had a client I converted way back when. They had various monetary units, so all the dollar amounts started with $.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah, so, try and think that through. Whatever naming convention you adopt, remember that not everybody has the same keyboard, and that, of course, avoiding mathematical, and sometimes just some characters are just confusing. They seem to add meaning to the field name when you don't really mean to.
Like colons.
Yes, although we use colons now, Jason, so careful where you throw stones there. Name spacing is particularly important to us as far as fields go because fields get dragged for relationships. So we want to get commonly used fields like keys up to the top of an alphabetical list. Whereas trivial fields, things that are just for the layout, or maybe they're record related, like record creation and modification, we want to get those down and out of the way. So just giving that some thought is worthwhile. Knowing what type of field it is just at a glance. FileMaker's getting better about that. We have the field picker where you can actually see what type of field it is before you put it on a layout. But there's still any number of places where you can't tell a field type in the list that they're giving you to pick a field. So if you can sneak in a field type into your naming convention, it saves you a lot of wondering, where you have for instance, a numeric field and then a calculated field based on that, and then a summary field. Sometimes if you're just looking at the field name, it can be hard to remember which one's which if you don't have some code in there in your field name to let you know what you're looking at. Field storage, for instance, if something's global, that's a really important thing to know if you're about to use that field. And purpose is a little more general than that. It's not really the field type or the field storage, but what is this field for? Is it an attribute of the data? Is it an attribute of the record, like record creation and modification? Is it a key? Is it a primary description? Is it for layout use only? Those are all different purposes, and that's a separate data point from what type of field or what type of storage and that sort of thing is what group is this in? Is this stuff I'm just using on the layout? Is this stuff that just tells me about record creation and modification? So these are all things to consider. Very quickly, I'm going to show you our old FileMaker our old field naming convention, because it's a little easier to spot the different parts. So all our primary keys always have the same name, which is for some reason a little controversial with some. But in our old convention, we called them __p. That puts the primary key right up at the top of the field list. And again, it's called the same thing in every table. So there's not like a PK contact, PK activity, PK objective, right? It's the primary keys all have the same name. And again, we get that right up to the top of the list. The foreign keys start with an underscore, and we use our TLA to keep those consistent with the table name that they're associated with. And again, we can add modifiers. If it's this is a special foreign key, sometimes you end up with more than one foreign key to the other table. And the basic structure here is purpose, and then field type, and then name, potentially with modifiers. Okay, so I'm just going to show you that as kind of a abbreviated walkthrough. Let me see, right here. This is an older solution as well. It's still current, but we started building this thing about a decade ago. So for instance, here's people, right? I've got the primary key up at the top. We have our constant, or _1, right? We want to get that up to the top because that's often used in relationships. Our foreign keys are underscore and then TLA. And then these, the first letter tells me these are attributes or data attributes, right? They start with an A. Whereas down here, like we've got one field that starts with a D, that's the primary description. Like if you're going to show one field from a related table, it should be this one. Fs are flags or booleans. Rs are record related, like creation, modification, layout header, what to put in the layout. Header is a name, right? So the first letter is an attribute. The second letter or group of letters is the field type, and we actually stole the shortcut keys from here. Right, so calculation is L, D for date. And then where something can have more than one, like for instance, calculations have a result type, so that's calculated text. It's an L followed by a T. Right, so a calculated number would be LN, right? Calculated date would be LD, etc. And then the name, considering name spacing like we talked about earlier with the name first, name last, etc. So this naming convention served us well for about 10 years. And it looks like Hebrew when you first look at it, but gives you quite a lot of information about the field you're looking at. The downside, as I'm about to confess here, was that the outcome was it was really clear for frequent developers. Like I said, if you worked with it for just a little while, you pretty much knew what every field was going to be called, and you could find them really easily, and they were nicely namespaced. But other developers or users who came across those field names just kind of looked at them cross-eyed. So we eventually decided to change. Okay, but this is an example, number one of just another way that you can address these goals, and that there's not just one way. I'm going to get that sentence out. Okay.
Sorry, Chris, I just wanted to ask, did you find it difficult that if you had, for example, first name, last name, and then you had a calculated name, which was name_C or something, like that one would not be in the same location because of your two-table identifier? Sorry, your one's a calc field versus one
because
is
of the two-letter identifier. Yes. Yeah, we did find that it was nice to have, for instance, all the calculations show together. So it had the nice effect of moving that calculated name away from the other ones. So in a way that was nice, but in another way, as you noted right away, now you've got your name floating around in another area. So that was something we fixed in our next version that I'm about to show you. So.
Okay.
I wish you'd been around when we came up with the first naming convention, because it took me a while to notice that. And you just picked it up just from a brief description, so impressive.
Well, I did it the same way you guys did, and then I switched to the same version, I guess, that you guys are using now.
Well, if you're talking about _C, not really, although nothing wrong with _C, I'm not saying that. But here's our newer convention. That tries to address that issue you just brought up, but primarily the readability, being able to look at a field name and, not have to dig through the codey parts to find out what the real name is. So we did change our primary field. We call it __ID, again, for clarity. I mean, for us, P was primary, and that made perfect sense, but, excuse me, ID seems to be more universally recognized as a key. So we switched to that. Foreign keys haven't really changed, except we added or we are in the process of adding the double underscore before the modifier text, if any. We gave a couple fields special names, active and description. And that's something particular to us. On the active side, all of our tables have an active flag, so that if you can't delete a record, you can deactivate it and have it not show up commonly in searches or value lists and things like that, but not delete it for data integrity reasons. So we have active in all our field lists, and we commonly use it in relationships. So we wanted it to come up right after the foreign keys, and that's what the colon does for us. And then the other one is description, which is that primary description. As I said, if you're going to show just one field from a related record, this is the field you want to show. You know, this is the what's this record called to a human being field. Okay. So we had a couple of specials there that we just, it starts with a colon and it's just called this in every table. Dates, times, timestamps, and anything global. We determined that there's no reason not to use that word in the field name. So for instance, if something is a timestamp, then somewhere in the field name it should say timestamp. If something is a date, then somewhere in the field name it should say date. So rather than trying to make that a code or something, we realized, you know, just writing out the word adds clarity for the user as well as the developer, and we don't have to shorten that. So those four things are identified just by having the word there. We'll have the word global, have the word timestamp, etc. We added some special characters at the end, like Booleans, we end with a question mark. Numbers end in a pound sign. And calculations end in a tilde. And if you have any combination of these, they're added in this order. So like a Boolean 1 or 0 would be question mark pound. A calculated Boolean numeric would be question mark pound tilde. Summaries end in exclamation points. Record-related stuff starts with an @ sign. And anything that's for, you know, layout, scripting, it's not really about the record. We start with a ZZ just to get it down to the bottom of the list. And let me show you what that ends up looking like. So here they come. Where'd it go? There it is. Let's go to something a little less daunting. All right, so here's our contacts. You have the primary key, the one that's commonly used. These are two account keys. We have an account table. I've said before, not with passwords or anything, but just more information about the account holder. And this is the account that created the record, the account that modified the record. Here's a foreign key for the mailing address that they want to use. They may have many addresses, but this is a specific address that they want to use for mailing. Right, so that's an example of the modifier where we are adding the second underscore for parsability, but we haven't done that yet. Here's those special name fields that end up right underneath the foreign keys. Some stuff about the record, starting with an @ and then you see the stuff that a user is likely to be sorting by or exporting or whatnot. It's a little easier to work with, you know, like Frank was pointing out, all the name stuff ends up together, whether it's, well, actually, bad example. This doesn't, because for reasons I can't explain very easily. But this is a contact, well, I'll try. It's a contacts table, and each contact is either a company or a person. So this is the person names, and this is the name regardless, where we spell out the name based on whether it's a company or a person. Yeah, things are namespaced. The little characters at the end don't tend to be distracting. You know, they at least don't distract you from being able to tell what the field is. And we've been using this for the last about 4 or 5 years and found it pretty comfortable. So I think that brings us to conversation, and I think somebody already started on me on the chat. Let's see. Color. Oh, I gotta scroll down a bit. Let's see. Okay. I'm gonna catch up. I just realized I've missed a ton of conversation over here.
Here, I can help, Chris. The last two are field name related questions. The rest are me.
Oh, okay. Okay, so I've got someone, I think it's Jeremy, saying no shame about using Greek letters when I don't expect anyone else will want to edit the code. Yeah, I understand that. Let's see. Oh, am I concerned that FileMaker will change the field order sorting at some point? I probably should be, but I'm not. Given that they've changed what constitutes a word break, that's not that far-fetched. But I think they're using the ASCII order. Does anybody know? That's a little deeper than I normally go.
I thought somebody had. I remember listening to some meeting where somebody was saying that they had a same thing, like some sort of a convention, and then it got screwed up because FileMaker changed what they would put at the top, so they had to go and change their convention.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so I guess that is a concern. Yeah, kind of wish they'd stop messing with that. But
That makes two of us.
right, right. Well, hopefully I'll stop being ticked off about the word breaks before they change something else. So I'm only upset about one thing at a time. But what do other people use? I've got a comment here from Karen advocating for more readable names or normal, quote unquote, normal names.
Well, in general, anything a client enters in or might use in a report or sort order as normal alphabetical, nothing too obscure in the front, except, of course, at the very top I have my primary and foreign keys with underscores starting them.
Oh, okay. So we're not the
Unlike,
only ones using underscores there.
I do the same thing in terms of naming, so I know for sure it's a calculation, text, timestamp, etc. Except I do it at the end, and I do underscore C, underscore G, and I also like my clients, especially the ones I'm working with as my primary key clients at each group, that they understand what a calculation is, what a global is, etc. So having the actual label at the end of the name with the beginning of the word C or G is helpful for them when we're discussing what's going on in the database.
Sure, sure. I do have to say I've used underscore C for constants before. I don't
I almost
anymore.
miss having that one in everything from way back when.
Yeah, the one in everything. Say again.
Yeah, before you had the join, what is it, spacing out.
Oh, the Cartesian? The Cartesian
Before you
join?
had the Cartesian join, you had to have a 1 in all your tables so that you had something to work with for that reason.
Right, right. Now, we still have a 1 in every table, but primarily we use that as a relationship to the active flag.
Right,
Because
yeah.
remember, we can. Right, right. So that way we only get active records.
Yep.
So we still find a lot of uses for that 1, and just relating to other Boolean values. So we've kind of put it in our template table, and it's in every one of our tables. We have a 1. It
right.
just comes up being
That's one of
useful
those
so
things.
often.
I mentioned the Z. I put a Z underscore in front of anything that absolutely does not matter to the client. So, of course, like any global, they would have no reason for exporting or sorting with that. So things like that, I shovel at the bottom with the Z.
Yeah, and we at this point we're using ZZ at. This was kind of our naming convention shifting at the last second. We ended up with the at in there as well. Long story. But it is consistent, and as we go forward, we're probably just going to switch that to a regular ZZ underscore in next revision.
Well, one of the other things I've done for myself is I put a ZR to remind myself that I have built the table occurrence based on that particular Z object. Relationship ZR.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's interesting. Now, does that mean, though, that if you add a table occurrence later, you have to go back and change the field name?
Yes, I would. because
Okay.
then they're all grouped together, and you know they're really important because things will break if you change their contents or anything. So,
Okay.
yeah, they're like set in stone once they've developed an R.
Oh, very interesting. That's a good tip. Yeah. Does
I'm
anybody
just,
still use spaces in there? Oh, go ahead.
sorry, I was just curious how many other people also still have are using the one for whatever purpose, just because you can't get something to work the way you need it to work without it.
I know we do. So,
Yeah, and I've needed it for a bunch of stuff also, where there's just no other way. Like you have to have a one in there to make something work, like in
right.
your table.
Yeah, sometimes it seems like it's not so much that we couldn't do it another way, but you'd end up calculating a lot of text strings because you want to relate to, only certain text strings and that sort of thing. And just being able to say, one. So being able to say one on the right side of the relationship rather than making a bunch of text strings on the left side of the relationship, or making a text string in a bunch of tables on the left side of the relationship. Am I making sense? This all makes sense in my head, but it's sounding obscure. I'm sorry. But you get that, right?
Yeah, I can definitely relate.
Yeah. So I still like my one field, you know. It just comes up so often that, like I said, we have a template table. We call it ZZ template. So we never create a new table except that we duplicate this one. So it just has those fields that keep coming up. And for our current version, we have a lot of these. We're working on getting rid of a lot of these in our next revision due to the newer features. But still making sure that your new table has modification timestamp, modification account, all that stuff, rather than retyping it. So having a template table, I think, is useful, so that you don't forget the stuff that's going to come up later.
One of the things I've actually noticed, I used to take let's say, I don't know, you have a template, you duplicate it, you call it contacts, and then you need to create companies, just for argument's sake. So you look at the contact table and you say, well, it's mostly the same stuff, so you duplicate that. If there's some stuff that you get rid of in contacts, which isn't part of your original template, what does become a real pain is when you write scripts that now need to reference company instead of contact. Or sorry, let's say you're doing this with you've duplicated contacts to company, but you're copying a script from events, for example, which I know seems a little bizarre, but if you repoint it to a table that was actually copied, it'll map to the same field. And if you duplicated the table and you deleted some stuff, sorry, if you took your template, deleted some stuff, and then duplicated that, then it doesn't line up anymore. So using a template makes your life a lot simpler.
Yeah,
it's mapping the order of the fields, not the names.
Yep.
Yeah. We have a template layout as well. So our practice is duplicate the template table. Don't add or change anything yet. First, duplicate the template layout, repoint everything, right, while everything's still lined up, and then make changes to your new table. So, all right.
Yeah, that took me a while to figure out.
Yeah. I wanted to ask, is anybody still using spaces in their table names, field names, etc.?
Yeah, a little chat going on the side about spaces and so on. So yes, it sounds like.
Oh, did I miss that? Oh, okay. I'm gonna try not to catch up there because that's a lot of text. But yeah, I mean, my old argument for not using spaces was the word breaks, but boy, am I whining about that again? Okay, I'll stop. Let's see. now we're moving into stuff where, at least in some areas, we don't have a lot of our own groundwork to cover. I think I've presented probably enough times in this group that it's not unfamiliar to you that we don't have all that many layouts. We have this kind of combined layout. So in almost all cases, one table has one data entry layout. There's very few times that we have several quote-unquote main layouts for the same table. So we just name our main layout the same as the main table.
Wouldn't you do the different for the different screen sizes? Like, for example, if you had...
Yes, if we have like iOS and so forth, then yes, we have to append something. Frankly, we don't do a whole lot of stuff for... I mean, we have done some, but frankly, this is an area where we haven't done enough to come up with a pattern, where we've really made our naming convention hard and fast for that sort of thing. So this is an area where we can, probably learn from others, who have more layouts.
I have like a consistent name all the way through, and then I'll put a pipe in the end and say like iPad or iPhone 6, iPhone Plus or iPhone 5,
Mm-hmm.
And I'll do that so I know when I'm doing it. So when I go, it makes life easier when you're bumping between things in your navigation.
Okay. Yeah. I think we've Jason, help me out here. We've done that at the end, and I think in other solutions we've done it at the beginning, which is an interesting point about layouts. Unlike just about everything else, they don't have to be namespaced because you can't sort layouts alphabetically, really. So,
yeah,
it wouldn't really make sense to do so. Yeah, so our convention is just the main layout has the same as the base table. We are planning to split out form and list, so we're expecting to have a TLA form, have the main table be the list, and then a TLA underscore form. And for those that are print layouts, of course, printing, all bets are off. You just every print layout is different, but we just do TLA and purpose. But aside from the iPhone, iPad thing, anybody else have some input on what they do as far as naming layouts?
Well, the other one I do is if I have what I call a base table, I just put BT underscore and then the thing. So if I have to do some special quickies, I can go in and out. But in essence, I do that.
We almost... Go ahead.
A lot of times I'll set those up, especially if you go into something somebody else did a pre-design in, and you don't know where the thing is located. Or they'll say this one's this way, and I'll just go to my base table and find that, and then have my base table and then the screen up that they're used to seeing and compare the two and see where the field is. Because the guy used crazy naming convention.
I found that with anchor buoy, I mean, you are, when you talk base table, do you mean the anchor?
Yeah, the fundamental table.
All right, because we find we very, very seldom have layouts that aren't on the base table.
All I have is, in essence, the name and stuff. As I said, this is especially when you go into something you for.
Right. Okay.
So it's not like when you do what you're doing, you're going in design. My major client, the thing that I work is, as I said, I'm semi-retired. He goes in and he'll. It was very nice for a FileMaker. Oh, I can put that name in and I can do that one. It's. I think the term was cluster, whatever it is.
Yes. All right. Karen?
And the other nice thing we used to go through the file name was, like, say, clients space database. don't go there either.
Right.
For one of my standard templates, when I have
Yep.
the basic, you have the typical list view, the typical entry view. I'll use a lot of pattern counting so that I can toggle easily for generic terms in a script between the entry and the list view. Obviously, the
Yeah.
trip reports, of course, are all very individualized.
Yeah, that's a good example of being able to parse out a name and use it in a script. So, correct me if I'm saying this wrong, but for instance, you've got scripts that take you from list to form and form to list, and rather than have a special script for each one or using a single step button, you're able to have a script that says, based on the layout I'm on, where am I trying to get, right?
Exactly.
Using
You
the
have the
names.
first type goes, and then if blah blah, then depending on whatever's at the end, which on me is my piping.
Mm-hmm.
So if
I
I go
use-
to the characters part, then it's depending on which screen I'm at. So I go find character and the name, and then if blah, very else.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So, yeah, a few tips there that yeah, as we do more with iOS and start to standardize more on that, and also as we split, form and list, we're paying more attention to the layout naming because we've kind of gotten off cheap so far, having basically one data entry layout the way we do it.
Can I ask how many people find they have to build a find layout for their clients?
Good question.
I've done it on a couple because it's what they do is a bear, and I just put in essence I made a whole bunch of globals for them to tap in and reset, and then the globals build the find.
Yeah, I have, over the years met quite a variety of people, but some, no matter how much you hit them over the head with the fact that, yeah, you are in find mode, it seems like you have to really, really control it to avoid them writing over their data.
Yeah, we've done. We don't break out a separate find, but we are sensitive to that sometimes just people don't know they're in find mode. Like if I go Control F here, the header changes a bit. We found that seems to work okay. We haven't had people trying to do data entry in the find mode. Our older method, that given your reaction might be more like this. You see how this is our older layout. And by the way, the client won't let me clean up the layout. He adds his own fields and doesn't care. So this is not my fault down here, okay? Anyway, if I go into find mode, see the color changes a bit.
Yeah,
I'm doing
I'll
that
actually
with conditional formatting.
I'll change the whole background color to really change the screen without anything actually moving, but the entire background color becomes another color. And then the word find usually has to be a good half-inch high.
Yeah, it has to be pretty darn large, because I do know what you're talking about from, doing a lot of data entry in FileMaker when I started out, and I was, as much a user as a developer. I more than once ran into the warning message you get after you add the 10th request.
Yep.
And at one point, one of the first scripts I wrote was to go back and forth from doing modify last find and then going into browse mode and copying the stuff I had put into find requests back into browse mode for me. So that was one of the first scripts I wrote because yeah, in our first database, at this company, that was 20 years ago, but yeah, that was real easy to do. But we have in our older system these two bars, and they change color based on state, or what we call state. So the normal look was maroon for no good reason. If we were creating a new record, let me get to one that doesn't have some bizarre thing going on here. This is let me see. Let's go to countries. Where did I? There they are. Yeah, countries. Nice basic thing, right? So if I create a new record, see it changes it to green.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm editing an existing record, it turns to blue. Just some clues on the screen for that sort of thing. But we still use the same layout. Um, I personally don't like having to have a separate layout for find, if I can avoid it. Using things like setting global fields to some text to help them out, or using conditional format, or now hide when. I feel like you can change enough of the screen that they know they're in find mode, which is really the key.
Yeah, I think
And then,
FileMaker hoped the little magnifying glass was all that would be enough, but it really doesn't fly.
no,
It,
no,
it's much
nobody
harder.
sees that. Yeah, we're all blind to that. I don't know why. On paper, I would think I'd notice that too, but I don't. So,
Quick question.
okay. Yeah.
Speaking of find mode, do people put in FileMaker's capabilities of adding multiple requests, omitting records, constraining or extending the found set?
Sure.
And do you find your users get confused by that, or don't understand how it works, or have a hard time with it?
I identify my users in levels over getting to know them, and like in the beginning, they have a very basic find mode, and then when I find someone capable of more, I end up developing them as the super user, and I teach them more things, and then they might even have their own UI for certain areas where they can do fancier find requests and get really into it. But yeah, you can't give everybody like, standard user features in the beginning because they'll just destroy everything.
Well,
Well, the thing
I
I
kind
found
of disagree with I kind of disagree with that in the find mode, because it's really hard to destroy something in the find mode.
The only problem with that is whether or not they realize they're in find mode. That's all.
Yeah, that is the key. But what I find, we put out our custom menus include things like constrain and extend, and add new request and so forth. And I find that it's just like with regular FileMaker. The newer user doesn't even know they need it, so it's really pointless talking about it, because
Yeah, you introduce
they
it
really
to
don't even know they need it. But
yeah.
the first time they need it, then you explain it. And I actually ended up doing a blog. I'm going to post it to the chat. That talks about constrain and extend and add request, and all the special find characters and that sort of thing. So when one of our users reaches that level and they say, well, I'm trying to find this, but I also want this, and what can I do now? I kind of give them a down and dirty run through, and then point them to the blog so that I don't have to stay on the phone with them for an hour and a half while they learn how to do all these cool new things. So.
The other thing I tend to do, I'm thinking of also systems. I just walk in and find, whatever they've built, and I'm rebuilding or restructuring it for them. Getting rid of the replace all command and getting rid of the delete all command.
Yep.
That should be doled out very judiciously.
Yeah, we have those two commands particularly. They're in our custom menus, but they install when you're a full access user.
Right.
So nobody else gets to see those, because man, are those dangerous. So yeah, big fan of the custom menus, being able to control that access.
I was going to say that I think that there's a good there's a good question about the use of multiple find requests and that sort of thing. And Chris, our combo layout list form combo view there kind of handles that, and I think in a really effective way when you're training users how to do that. Again, because they're doing their finding right here where they do their data entry, and of course, if we can get over the hump of teaching them that when you go into find mode, things behave differently. But being able to add a new request here and enter the criteria for each one of those requests separately, having several separate requests in a row, plus a request that omits values that are matching, all kind of represented in this one interface here, is pretty effective. it does take that training though. You know, you're definitely dealing with your more advanced users by the time you get to that stage. So
So you've got a footer at the bottom there?
Yeah,
You're
this is
splitting your
footer.
screen. Yeah, sure.
Yep. So this is body, this is footer. Sure. Let me hit enter here, so I can finish the find I was doing.
Oh, okay. I've never seen anybody use the footer that way. That's interesting.
Yeah, we started doing that version, I want to say 7. It was either 6 or 7. They let us type in the footer. Prior to that, you couldn't type in the footer or the header.
Right.
Right? But an interesting side effect is that the header and footer show the current record in browse mode.
That's right.
So you can end up having this
I've often
kind of
done the
split screen.
header that way. I've never thought of making good use of the footer in the way you're doing it right here with the body at the top.
Yeah, I would say
it's a footer fetish.
Oh no.
It's a good use for the footer because I really haven't had much use for it except what you've got there at the bottom or page numbers. So there you go. That's fun.
Yeah. Now, a couple of things. I should confess first that in our next iteration, we are probably going to split form and list because for every person that loves this view, there's somebody else that hates it.
Ooh, I have a fun tip for that.
Create 2 of them.
What I've started doing usually for print reports is I put no body at all, and I put a sub-summary that is the primary key. So when you sort by the primary key, you expose your body, and when you don't, you now have a summary.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that could work. And you can type in a summary too, right?
Yeah. No, basically it avoids having to have a summary print report and one with a body. I keep the body on, but only as one of the sub-summaries that requires sorting by the primary key.
Very interesting. Oh, I might have to play with that. That's very interesting.
Yeah, just avoid having extra layouts, that's all.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. And then another caveat of the unified layout here. It's about the only thing that we found that works kind of wonky in the footer is you can't tab through portal rows in a footer. So you know how in a body you get to the last field in a portal row and it tabs to the first field in the next portal row? In a footer it doesn't. It just keeps going through the one portal row. So there are ways around that. You can make like an invisible object with an on object enter, et cetera, et cetera. So there are ways around that, but just a little caveat if you decide to try this, that keep an eye on tabbing through portals. You might have to do a little bit of an extra step. Okay. Let's see.
Chris, can I just ask your find mode? It seems to be menu driven. Is that like that's your standard? I assume. Like you don't put buttons. You don't put buttons for adding a new request or omitting or constraining found set, that sort of thing.
No, we generally don't. We are here. I'll give you kind of a sneak preview on some skunkworks type stuff. But let me see if I can remember where I put that. Let's see. Browse. Yeah, this is there's a. All right. We're getting off topic a little, but I'm going to try and keep this really, really brief. Short tangent. Couple issues I have with buttons. One is maintaining them on every single layout, right? And the other is, I believe that a picture is worth 1,000 words and an icon is worth less than one, right? Words work perfectly well. So the new layout we're designing has, this is a button bar, and they're calculated names so that we can change that button bar as we move through the system and not have to, keep adding buttons after buttons after buttons, and also their text. So we are moving toward putting more of the stuff that was in the menu onto the screen, partly for iOS compatibility, right? Because of course iOS doesn't have the menus. But in our current solution, yes, it is menu driven, and we find that that works for a lot of our users. We occasionally get the request, I just need a button out there. I don't want to go look in the menu. It's not like we can't add a button, but most of the time the menus work just fine. And we maintain the same keystrokes, so like Control F, or if I want to omit a record, it's Control T. And just like it was in regular FileMaker, we try and keep it as close as we can to the regular FileMaker experience. Because I've talked to developers that I actually had one developer say that he went to great lengths to obscure the complexity of find mode, and my head kind of exploded. I'm like, that's like the simplest way to find anything of practically any program I know of. It's one of FileMaker's selling features, So I want to leverage it. I mean, there are some concerns like making sure that making sure people know they're in find mode. That is a very serious problem. You've got to address that. But find is hugely powerful in FileMaker. It's so flexible and forgiving compared to querying records in other platforms. That seems a shame to hide it all. So.
No, I definitely agree. It's like, I guess I'm used to having it as part of the standards. So if I create a find screen, the top portion looks identical, and it's got the the constrain, the extend found set. But like I've got users asking, well, what's the difference between constrain and extend? And like I've gone as far as putting a description right there on the field, and they still seem to be somewhat confused sometimes.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a reason that I don't think those buttons will likely ever end up out on the layout for us, although they might. But
can we get like a popover with a Venn diagram or something that they could use too?
Yeah, that's almost what they need.
Right.
I hate to call those things advanced functions because they're awfully easy to use with not too much training. But like I said, a lot of times new users don't even know what they're for. So trying to explain it to them when they first sit down is kind of a waste of breath. By the time they need it, they'll have forgotten what you were talking about. So anyway, reeling back from the tangents, good tangents and fun tangents, but we do have a bunch of different areas here, and they should go by pretty quick, though, because I think a lot of them we really don't have much of a naming convention. So they'll either go by quick or they'll generate more of this good discussion. So layout objects, we have gotten into the habit of naming, or we're getting into the habit of naming pretty much every object on a layout. And things you might want to know from a naming convention of the layout object is what type of object is it? Is it a button? Is it a label? Is it a field, etc.? And maybe something of a purpose, like, outside of just the type, what kind of general grouping of objects is this for? So our convention is not very robust here, but we do have good old TLA for the purpose, like, is this a button, a field, just straight text, is it a label, the name, of course. But this part I think is key, is if you put that information on an object name, like for instance, this is just the fact that it's a button, right? When you duplicate it, it may end up being button copy 1 or button 2 copy 5, whatever, but the beginning of the object name still tells you it's a button. Right? So even as you duplicate objects and forget to rename them or just don't bother to rename them, you still have something parsable in the object name. And let's see. Whoop. And then, of course, the ability to read those. You can essentially read the layout by getting all the layout object names, finding those that start with particular characters. You can identify what objects are inside other objects, and along the way you can make decisions about what do I want to do next? What is the active object? What is the object I'm working on? Am I in a portal? Am I on a slide, et cetera, et cetera. It gives you a lot of metadata to work with. Any comments on that? Anybody else doing a lot of object naming, or is this still pretty new for others as well? Rarely naming objects, as Frank.
I fundamentally use it if I have to jump to show like an increased screen size of a particular picture, then jump back. Mm-hmm. That's when I use it, because I have a bunch of tabs across the top, depending, like main part, pictures, and comments, and depending.
Right. So getting back to the right tab, right?
Getting back to the right tab, correct.
Yeah. So for instance. Hopefully I'm on a layout where we obeyed that naming convention, but let's see. Oh, no wonder it's underneath my panel here. Like all of these are tab primary and then the name so that I can get back to them.
Yeah.
Right?
Chris, are you saying you name everything whether or not you plan to use it in the script at that time?
This is something we're moving toward. In the version you're looking at right now, we were not as religious about it. We were mainly just labeling tabs, because actually we built this before slides. And we're naming objects that are on every layout because they were on the template and you duplicate them. What we're moving toward in our next iteration is naming every single object, and naming every single object manually, of course, would be unwieldy. But we don't actually add a lot of new items to our layout. We duplicate other ones or copy-paste them. So that idea that if you have an object that starts with, LBL, so you know it's a label, when you duplicate it, it's still a label, even though we've strung some other stuff onto the name, like, copy 1, copy 4, or something like that. But you can still address it. You can still find out from this object, where am I? So I think the object names are useful and steadily becoming more useful. So by having some template objects that are already named, when you duplicate them, they're already named as well and still have some meaning in their object name. Does that make sense? Uh-oh, it got really quiet.
Oh, I said yes, but I was muted, so oh well.
Oh, okay. Okay, I was scrambling. I thought my headset died or something. I was hearing crickets. So, yeah, okay. Yeah, okay. So not terribly exciting on that front, but let's see. Next area is valueless. Name spacing is important. Trying to get the table name in there if you're using values from a field. Things like, does this have 2 values in it? If it's related and so forth. Related only versus all records. Our conventions aren't much here. We have a common value list that we do for just about every table that has the description field. It just ends up being _TLA, like we just have that for every table. Beyond that, we don't do a whole lot. We sometimes put the whole relationship name if it's related values. But does anyone else have any input on that? Say again?
Oh, could you back up your slide then?
Back to here.
Have the list. There you go. No, you had said you don't actually do a whole lot, so I wanted to go back and look at what you actually were doing. There you go.
Oh, yeah, this is what we, things we might want to accomplish. We don't, like I said, we don't do so many value lists or get so meticulous about it. But so I was curious if anyone else had any conventions that they use in naming value lists?
What, young lady?
I like to differentiate also in the names to be clear whether I'm pulling from a custom value list, a related value list, a all, again, everything from when you're seeing only the text and you're not actually looking at the object, I like it to explain itself.
Right, right. So what kind of naming do you use to make that clear?
I have to go look, but one of my favorite characters is, well, Mac, option F. I got in the habit like decades ago of that referring to a field name. So option F is one of my, it's the curly Q F. I use that in, I guess that's my custom value list, meaning it, no, that's the one that's based on a field. So if it's actually it's from the option F, which is the long curly F.
Okay. So if I ever encounter some of your work, I can have you email me that F so I can copy and paste it. or I'll just give it to Wayne on his Mac and he'll knock that out for me. So,
yeah, no, I make people jealous with my accented characters when I'm writing. Like I can write the word resume correctly. Woohoo!
Yeah, right, right. The rest of us are just trying to force those languages to give those up. So if French and Spanish and so forth could just get over it, Yeah.
Ooh, Wayne's showing off there.
Oh, show off. Okay.
He's got it's probably easier.
Yes, he does. Oh yeah, I have to. I know there's a keystroke on Windows to do it, but I also I take Rosetta Stone, so I can switch my keyboard to German or Spanish or whatnot. But all right.
Does anyone differentiate between value lists that you use all the time? For example, just the number 1 as a checkbox for something.
Good point.
Yeah, I actually have, again, with the underscore at the top, all the common value lists that anybody would have in the system are all with the underscore up at the beginning because you're going to use them all over the place.
Yep. Yeah, in our current version, our one value list, which really is just one, ends up way down at the bottom. But I think in our next iteration, we're going to make it underscore 1 so that it'll show up at the top. Because we do end up using pretty much all our checkboxes, or all our single checkboxes are 1s. You can just hide the 1 easy enough.
Do you find it's useful to have the underscore in front of the table name there? Like, I noticed you have both. You have underscore AC, and then further down you have AC something something.
Yeah, these are the ones I was talking about for a specific purpose. This is our selection routine. So, like here.
Okay.
That's by the way where the underscore X relationships come in as well. That's the relationship that relates this word to a record so I can fetch the key. But this is a standard thing that we have throughout all our solutions and all of our tables where you can pick from a list, and then if it's not there, it offers you the chance to add a new record. If there's duplicates, it shows you the duplicates and asks you which one you want, that thing.
Yep.
Yeah, Jason did a demo on that a while back, but those value lists that you're seeing up at the top are for that purpose. So that's why we put the underscore and put them up near the top. They're a very, very specific purpose. Which highlights that, when you're making a naming convention, there's no one size fits all, Sometimes you have a particular thing that you do that justifies, putting something to the top or putting something to the bottom or, naming something a little bit differently so that it's easier to find because you personally use it a lot, So the important thing is, and the important takeaway here, I think, is to think it through, Don't just sit down and start slapping together names, right? We are running a bit over on time, I think all I have left is scripts and files, which I don't think were very interesting anyway. But why don't we talk about scripts real quick? And because I would like to get other people's input on that. Um, there are a lot of things we could put in a script name. Things like if the script requires a particular context, what parameters the script takes, what kind of results you're going to get from the script, whether it's a subscript versus a main script, if you make that distinction. I think I've talked before about our scripting style is a little unusual, where we script functions instead of particular buttons most often. So we don't end up doing that. And I wanted to know what other people did. Karen, you have needs a parameter SP?
Yeah, I'm looking through my scripts. That's the first thing I notice most often. If there's going to be a script parameter called, I put parens SP at the top to remind anybody who's trying to use that script that they're going to have to
Oh, okay.
look through the script and figure out what script parameters they want to work with.
All right. Yeah, I like that convention actually, although our scripts because we script the way we do, like for instance all of these are parameters that you can pass, you know. So if we were to list all the parameters, they'd never fit, and pretty much all of those scripts require parameters because we do very parameterized scripting. So it's not really applicable for us, but I like the convention when I'm looking at other people's work where it's a very specific script, and my inclination is to think, oh, I can just run this, you know, because I can see that it's contextual. But having that reminder that you're going to need to pass in X and Y is nice. We kind of, because there's so many parameters, we just kind of put them at the top of the script.
Yeah, you call them all as variables, etc. I'm curious, do you have a print script? I'm just curious how yours might look.
Yeah.
That's something I usually have a lot of parameter work inside of.
Yeah, so we have the layout, the quantity to print, the orientation, whether to preview, whether to dialogue.
Right.
These three, the key, the name, or these two, the key and the name have to do with if they're in print preview and they say, I want to create a PDF. If you pass these parameters, it will create an attachment record linked to that key so that you can, so that, you know, the attachment, that PDF you've created will also be attached.
Mm-hmm.
They have a very specific one for attention, which has to do with when you're printing something where it's to one contact but attention another contact. So sometimes we'll have layouts that reference that. But yeah, and then it just runs through. I don't want to get off too much into scripting strategies, but most of these parameters have defaults, so you don't have to pass every single one.
Right, that's what I was thinking because
you only pass the exceptions, and you know there are some scripts like I have a delete script. The delete script is not going to operate unless you pass it a key because it's just too dangerous to, you know, just hope that this is the current record that you wanted to delete, right? So we require a key, but we have very few required parameters, but a lot of optional parameters.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking for the print script. It's all about the options that they might want to call if they make a print button.
Right. But I mean, here's probably a super extreme example. Just this has to do with our X-Link that I was just showing you. It has defaults based on context, based on the name of the field, and well, just basically based on the name of the field. But you can override any of these parameters. You know, so you can run this script with no parameters. If you're running from a correctly named field and it has all the normally named relationships and everything, you can run this with no parameters at all. But if you need to override it because the field is named something different or the relationship is named something different, or I don't want to fetch the primary key, I want to fetch back a different field or something like that, you can override any of them. So, but getting back to it, that's the reason we don't put parameters in our script names. But again, I mean, I've seen that convention, and in a solution that doesn't have too many variables, and where or those variables are required, that seems like a wonderful idea, is putting that in the script name so that you're not surprised, you know.
Yeah,
Do you put anything else in your script names? Like, can you tell if there's a required context, like this will only work from the invoices screen, or maybe what kind of results you can expect back, like if it's going to pass back something more than pass or fail?
I have to pick a good client to look through because what's fun about what I do is I often adopt clients with other people's scripting style already in place, and I'm a
Right.
recent developer, so I have to maintain like a dozen or so different methods because I don't want to radically change everything that they're already used to, especially if there's still someone else coming in developing.
Mm-hmm.
So it depends on what I'm looking at.
Yeah, well, that's an excellent point in and of itself regarding naming conventions. Is a good naming convention someone doing what you're doing should be able to come in and adopt it.
Like here, I'm looking at this one. It's just simple. Set portal to invoice ID from invoices. Like in other words, no, you're not going to call this anywhere except from the invoice table.
Right. So you're just making it kind of verbose, but you're getting that point across, right? So,
I actually share one of my systems with my husband.
Velocity is sometimes good. Say again.
I was just going to make fun of one of my clients. The husband started the system in ClarisWorks in 1988, right?
Wow.
So he's still kicking around, and once in a while, if she can't get a hold of me, she asks hubby to dive in, and I'm like, no! So, but what's also very important then is commenting. Who did what and when?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And documenting your naming convention, actually.
Well, that's why I sent you my link, because I share that with everybody I work with or collaborate with, so they know what I'm going to be doing.
But I think it's really important that to see the other side of that, where you're coming into other people's solutions and having to adopt their conventions.
And you don't want to do it radically or change anything radically, because you're only going to serve to confuse. So you have to move it towards something more organized over a long period of time.
Yeah, and I think it's one of those things like if you have a really clean house and people come over to visit, and you can have a wild party and people will clean up before they leave because the house was clean when they got there. You know what I mean? But if you have the slightest bit of mess when they show up, they won't clean before they leave. And I think it's kind of like that with naming conventions.
The last thing to go on that client that's moving to 15 is to break it up into anchor buoy, because that's going to take so much work in and of itself. So I'm just laughing thinking of the husband, because I don't know, he's self-taught FileMaker, so everything he did was without any convention at all, just kind of slapping it all together.
Yeah. I think it's interesting. Sometimes I'll get into other people's work, and I can actually identify 2 or 3 of the developers that have been in the system. Like,
this one has about 8.
That's so and so, and that's this guy. And,
yeah, I was just thinking of one, Chris, where there are probably, I think, like pretty much every developer, development company in like Central Florida has had a hand in the solution from from time to time. So I could see there's like at least 6 different conventions for like every facet of the system going on. So no one was as polite as you were suggesting, Karen. trying to
Well,
stick with
I'm only
one
doing it
idiom,
in reverse because it's the only way to not step on the toes of the client, because even though it's the ex-developer, he's also the husband. So it's pretty funny.
Yeah, but that's a really good lesson to pass on. There is being a good citizen. That the principles of a naming convention are important. The principle of have one. What is it you're trying to accomplish? Can I get this point across in a name? But not being so hard and fast with your particular naming convention that you can't work with others. If you can recognize, oh, the purposes are being met, they're just doing it a little bit differently, as you're doing,
You
Karen.
have to adopt whoever you're working under.
Right. Then you can make it so that, we don't run into solutions like Jason's talking about, where you go in and go, hey, I know that guy. I'm going to call him and see what he thought of this, because he totally used his own naming convention and just ignored somebody else's.
See, this is where the
It allows
coloring
allows you to be it allows you to be a good citizen, if you recognize what we're trying to accomplish, not just the particular way that you happen to do it.
I'm thinking about when I was talking about coloring the table occurrences. I think this is the client that made me decide I needed to do that, because his hodgepodge squid octopus thing of God knows what, 50 tables all on one, it was a mess. And it wasn't anchor buoy. So to start, I just colorized the whole thing just so I could figure out what was linked where. And then the way, like your anchor buoy, if it wasn't anchor buoy, you would still be able to see easily what relates to what, because you've got the naming convention chain walking through all the elements. So after I got him on the colors, then I started adding that front half where it showed the chain of table occurrence connections, so that you could start to read it alphabetically in the pull down list. Because you're seeing everything related to everything, but they're not really.
Right.
It's a lot of fun. It's one of the more interesting relationship diagrams I have to deal with.
Right. Yeah, okay. That's an intriguing idea about the colors. I don't know if we'd run out of colors eventually, but
there's no running out of colors ever.
Yeah. Well, run out of colors I can tell apart.
Oh wait, no, that's a good point. There is actually tests for what level of color sensitivity your eyes have, and it's called the Farnsworth test, but some people do fail it, so you're right.
Right.
And again, you're not supposed to design things expecting people not to be colorblind. That's rude too.
Yeah, I have a client who's colorblind, and I'm sorry, he's not in that role anymore, but he was CEO of the company when I built the solution, and I'd be showing him, oh look, and this turns red. He goes, well, I'll trust you. Everybody else will see it, but I can't.
They use red for good and green. Red for bad and green for good. And if they can't tell the difference,
Yeah. One of my favorite little factoids is that in a lot of the languages of the world, the same word is used for both green and blue.
Really?
Yeah. Isn't that interesting? That they just see it as shades of the same color. So, I can't imagine. Well, I try to imagine. But so next time you're having an argument with somebody about whether that's green or blue, just anyway. All right. Well, I did have a couple more slides about file naming, but that's another area where, generally we develop in one file, so we don't have much of a naming convention going, except some kind of pie-in-the-sky stuff that we're working on. So we are running way over on time, but I think this has generated some really good discussion, and I know I've gotten some great new ideas. I hope everybody else has. Does anybody have any final comments before we wrap this up?
One comment on the file thing, and you putting everything in there. I have one place where they put a lot of photos or documents in it. I made that a separate file completely. Just from the point of view, if something goes foobar, it's a lot easier to clean up the other one than a 8 gigabyte picture file that probably has 1 gigabyte of data.
Right. Well, We're looking at doing that as well. Like I said, we have some kind of pie in the sky skunkworks stuff that we're working on. And that is one of the things that we want to break out into a separate file is attachments. Because although we are using external storage, so the file doesn't end up huge, but the rebuilding of that file, even with external references, if something goes foobar, as you said, I want to be able to get the main file up and get people working while I'm getting the container file up.
Yeah.
You know, so that, and we're looking at breaking out. We're looking at doing more activity logging and audit trail, and those are other ones that may end up being, huge data sets. So rather than slowing down, bringing up the main file,
Yep.
Being able to bring up the main file and then get everybody working while you work on the larger files. So we're looking at breaking things out by module, breaking things out between data and interface. So it does bring up some new naming challenges.
I also break out based on the frequency of which they need to be backed up. So anything that's hot
That's
and
another good point.
banged on all day long is in one file set that is, obviously like every 10 minutes, every half hour, whatever it is, and then nightly files or even like monthly if it's just, stuff that needs to be hanged on to, but it doesn't actually get edited. But yeah,
That's an excellent idea.
Long-term, short-term, and files.
Karen, does that depend a lot on the number of clients too?
You mean number of users?
Yes.
I'm not worrying about it from that point of view, although I know there's issues also to think about with like thin tables and whether or not it's being used over the WAN and whatnot. But in general, obviously, you don't want to be doing backup in such a way that affects the user's comfort, like ties them up at all. But usually it's a matter.
Same sort of consideration. If you have a very, very large table, but it doesn't change very often, you don't want that one slowing down the backup every 15 minutes or something.
And you don't want that in the file with all the hot stuff that, they'd slit their wrists if they lost a half an hour of data.
Right. Excellent point. All right. Well, I think we probably ought to wrap up. We've, like I said, it's been a great discussion, but we are pretty well over time. So, just one more time. Any last minute comments? Because I don't want to lose any of these great ideas. But by the same token,
here's something I want to bring up. Is there anybody out there that lives near the Disney studio? Because in their archiving area, I found out I was trying to get a person to come to my Disneyana Club thing, and the author is out there, and he said they use FileMaker in the Disney archives, and if you know anybody in that area, they might want to check it out.
Oh, interesting. I have a friend who does AI work for them. Yeah, in Florida, you're talking, right?
No, I'm talking California because I live in Florida.
Sorry, no. I know a guy in Florida.
Disney archives are where the main studios, and I think they used to do work in Epcot, and I think they moved stuff like that out, didn't they? Or Hollywood Studios, and they moved the people out to California, I believe. But as I said, I was trying to get a guy to go, and I showed him my collection database. He said, "Oh, we use FileMaker in the archives because that's where he in essence did that, and he did a nice book on various things of pop-ups and stuff." And I was trying to get him in to do a presentation. So if you know anybody who lives in that area in California near the archives, you may want to forward that.
Okay.
I said that would have been my dream job anyway, but too bad I reached this age prior to going out there,
Yeah. No, I know a lot of developers up in the Northeast and I think the Northern California area. I'm trying to think the Southern California.
But
nobody's coming to mind right now, but I'll keep it in mind. And yeah. Okay.
I don't know if he hasn't worked there in 3 or 4 years, so, but that's what he told me. They used to use FileMaker in their archive area.
Interesting.
Imagine Angel City's down there somewhere, right?
Pardon?
Oh, I'm just thinking of developers in the LA area. Oh, I was going to scroll down and look at your last slides. You changed the pane.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it was
Uh,
funny. I keep using my mouse to try and move the screen, and I realize, wait, no, that's not.
oh, okay. Yeah. From here, I had styles and themes.
I want to see your theme slide. There we go.
Yeah, our convention is we start with an X just to separate it out from the standard stuff, and then object type, and then name. So it would be like X underscore BTN or X underscore FLD, and then the name of the style itself.
I'm still frustrated with styles because it doesn't work the way page layout programs have for decades.
Right,
And,
I hear you.
and Microsoft Word also, just
Yeah,
layering the style names on one another.
right, right. That and not being able to address the CSS directly. But, and then I had custom menus, a little bit about including hotkeys for us window users and using shortcut keys generously. Actually, do you know about hotkeys? Being a Mac user?
Well, I'm not sure what you're referring to. I know I can certainly do a lot with the Mac operating system to add additional
Yeah.
keys on top. And then, of
Right.
course,
So you have these. These are shortcut keys, right?
Right.
yeah, now I can do those in the Mac
Okay.
OS, or I can
Yeah.
use Key Maestro,
Hmm.
stuff like that. So what do you
But
mean?
the hotkeys are, you see the underscored
Oh, yes,
underlined letters?
that's a Windows thing.
Right. So I can go like Alt R, right? And then if you put an ampersand before a letter in the menu name, you can dictate what the hotkey is.
Oh, that's very cool.
Right, and actually we weren't doing that much before. You can also do that now with dialogue buttons as well. Right, so here's one that I haven't actually done. Right, like let's say modify last find here. If I go to the records menu, this is our database. I can mess with it, right? And I go to modify last find, and I put an ampersand here, like so. It won't actually show the ampersand, but it'll underline the next letter.
Now you've given me another reason to use my Windows laptop to check and see how those came out.
Yeah, FileMaker itself has not been respecting those in the last couple versions, and I could rant about that for an hour, but I won't.
Actually, yeah, Chris, since you mentioned that, let me jump in. We actually have to wrap up the recording of the meeting as well here. So,
yeah, let's do that. Let's do
just so
that. We're kind of
everybody can.
rambling at this point, but
Certainly, Karen, thanks for the comments. We love having you because you keep the discussion going. So don't think I'm trying to cut you off. We're just running up against a hard stop. So
yeah.
No worries. I actually started with the margaritas, so I tend to get a little animated.
Oh, you should have told me. I would have made
Oh,
one
I
over here
had
too.
bits, salsa, and the guacamole all laid out here. It was.
Oh,
Oh,
that's
jeez, we're coming to your house next month.
yeah, right.
right.
FMPUG in New
All
York.
right. All right. Well, yeah,
Have a great night,
we should
guys.
wind up. Thanks a lot. And next month it looks like we've got Ronnie Rios speaking, so it should be another exciting meeting. So
Oh, he's
look forward to
doing
seeing
his.
him. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I did see that presentation. Is that the whole? I don't know. Maybe I'll join just for the fun of it. I did see it already. I think.
Oh well, I hope you'll join anyway, though. You can heckle. So
Oh, did you see what I sent you today from the New York
I did.
group? The Windows
did,
one?
yeah.
I really want to see that, but I don't want to go into the city, so swapped it.
Are they not doing it virtually? I thought
No,
from your email they were doing it virtually.
those
Oh.
guys won't even let you Periscope. They're very paranoid.
Oh.
Aaron, if you used to go to the NY Mug,
Yeah.
I used to go there when I was in Fairfield, working in
Oh,
Dairy.
okay. Then you might have met me then.
Way back, but it was like I've been down in Florida since 2003, 2004.
How many years has that been going? I can't remember really. I've been around about since then.
I remember going to the meeting the week after 9/11, and I could walk 6th Avenue with only about me on the street.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we will see you next month. Thanks for a great discussion.
Thanks, guys.
Really enjoyed it. So talk to you next month.
Take care. Bye.
See ya.
All right. Thank you.
All right. Good evening.